What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York calling from the quarantine zone again. And this time we are here with Vicky of the Agonist. Great to be able to talk with you again.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's so awesome to have you here. Thank you for giving us some new music days before the world wept. This new EP coming out very soon. Is this like intended to be something to like hold fans over while we wait for like a full length follow up to Orphans? Is it like a good representation of the direction the Agonist is going into? Like, how did this
Yeah.
EP sort of see the light of day?
Yeah, so definitely the second. Definitely a good representation of our sound. I think it's more mature sounding and cohesive and just like taking everything that the agonist does best and putting it together. In terms of like, okay, did we do this, to kind of fill in the gap for full length? That wasn't really the intention. We just started writing music and this turned out to be a concept. So once we filled 5 songs, I felt like this is good. This is enough. I don't want to add any more and kind of derail from the theme that we have going on. And that being said, we do have a lot more music. So who knows? Maybe next year, maybe the year after that, we'll have another full length.
In terms of the concept, is it like kind of picking up where you left off after Orphans, or is it almost like a new concept that's being addressed?
It's really interesting because it was like accidental. I had 3 songs written, and I sort of noticed the theme there, and so I wrote the other two with that in mind to kind of fill in the gaps and create a cohesive story. Um, but then after I did it, I sort of saw how it could tie into certain songs from Orphans, and after like just last week I was thinking of how I could continue it on the next release. So what's happening right now is like these 3 releases would be connected but completely unintentionally. Like none of this was planned.
Well, isn't that how always the best art exists? None of it is planned.
That's what they say, yes. And I am a very on the fly sort of person. I don't like I keep telling myself I need to plan ahead and prepare, but I'm still that person that just shows up and like, okay, what are we doing? You know? So I guess yeah, I'm used to it at this point.
Well, with this concept that you're addressing in it, did you have this concept in mind before you started putting pen to paper for the songwriting, or did the concept sort of come through fruition as you were hearing more and more of it?
The second, it just happened. Like, yeah. I think the way I write my lyrics is that I may have a theme in mind for a song, but it's written in a way where it's up to interpretation. Um, and I think that's the beauty in it that, like, I've met people that told me that, they thought the song meant one thing. And when they told me and I looked at my lyrics again, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess I could see why you thought that. And I think that that's really great because then it's very relatable and personal. But then the songs themselves, when you put them all together, they tell a story as well.
Absolutely. And I've noticed that, like, even the voice that you have has its own sort of, like, context. Like, I remember watching your awesome Kill Switch Engage cover of My Curse, which is a song I've been listening to almost, like, my whole life now. And, like, even your own voice, like, adjusted the meaning behind it as well. The way that you brought in your own cleans behind it, your own distinct screams. Like, I think you kind of, like, took Howard Jones' vocals and just made them your
Yeah.
own.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's not something I often hear, but it is definitely something I aspire to do because I feel like what makes the voice so unique compared to any other instrument is how it's not just about the notes. It's not just about like how high can you sing, how low can you sing, and stuff like that. It's different interpretations of the same notes, and this is what we call emotion. Sometimes you can hear behind someone's voice that they're smiling or that they're sad or whatever, and that the facial expression, I guess, kind of seeps into the vocal performance, and there's no other instrument on the planet that you can do that with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, with guitar, like, you could kind of like, I feel like with a voice, it's like the most, for lack of better words, like the most naked instrument. Like if you slightly go off key, I think it's easier to tell. With a guitar, like, no disrespect to
Yeah.
Danny, but like I think if you slightly botch a note, I
Yeah.
think you could get away with it a little bit
Yeah.
easier.
Yeah. You can bend it a little bit, be like, until you reach it, but on the voice that would sound really awkward.
For this EP, for the first single that you released off of it, and being that it's a 5 song EP, I don't know if you're releasing any more singles, but could Remnants in time maybe be a good representation of what this whole EP is going to sound like? Or even with these 5 songs, there's a lot more tricks and twists?
Yeah, I think there are certain things that reoccur in the other songs, certain elements. The drums being one. I think Simon's really like giving it his all on all the songs. A lot of choirs in all the songs, which are very, very strong in Remnants in time. Um, Unfortunately, there's no more piano. That's the only song that has piano. So maybe it's not 100% representative of the full EP, but there are some elements that repeat for sure.
Okay, please bring piano back for the next full length Agonist
Yeah.
album, please.
It was it was kind of a test, a little bit with that song because originally there was no piano and I just kind of I went on a whim and I wrote one for the beginning and the end of the song. Um and it was a little bit of a test. I'm like, okay, let me see how people, receive this. Cuz I'm not really a piano player. Like I'm self-taught and the things I play are very simple, like whatever comes to mind. So I don't think we're gonna turn into like, Flesh God Apocalypse where the piano parts are crazy, but I think a little bit of it is cool.
Never say never. When you announced that tour with Flesh God Apocalypse, which I hope eventually happens again, like I could not think
Yeah.
of like, and I'm not just saying, I really could not think of a better band to open that bill, because I saw the first time I saw the Agonist was on tour with Flesh God Apocalypse, and
Yeah.
Epica was headlining,
Yeah.
and Arcona was also on the bill. So I think you and
Yeah.
Flesh God Apocalypse is the ultimate symphony of pure darkness.
Yeah, I think somehow like we work well together musically, even though we're not doing exactly the same thing. And like they're on a whole other technical level when it comes to like all their orchestral elements. Like we're very simple in comparison. But I thought it was very interesting that a lot of people made that reference with Remnants in Time. They were like the what would they call it there? The flesh agonist or agonist apocalypse or whatever. And I'm like, that's really cool because we don't have any orchestral like stuff whatsoever. It's all done with my voice.
I sense a split EP happening. I sense a split EP happening.
That'd be pretty cool.
Well, I think the Agonist has always had a sound that's like appealed to multiple audiences. Like you've done that Epica Flesh God tour, which is
Yeah.
for symphonic fans, but you also did that
Yeah.
European tour with Ginger, and I mean they're not symphonic metal at all. So I think the Agonist
No.
has like a sound that could really appeal to multiple audiences.
Yeah, we've always been one of those bands that's very difficult to place because of that. Because, like, we have elements a little bit from one genre and it can appeal to some people that like that. But then we could have elements from something completely different. And it's a blessing and a curse because you know that when you play and you open up for a band, when you don't sound like super close to what they do, you're only winning a percentage of that crowd. But then it makes it really easy for us to go on tour with a bunch of different bands. So yeah.
Pick your poison. Now, in order to like get that lyrical inspiration or think of these concepts or stories, do you almost have like a usual place that you have to go to in order to cultivate ideas, like a studio, or do ideas sometimes strike when you least expect it?
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit more random when it comes to my ideas. I can obviously sit down and write a song if I have to. Like I just did it this week for a feature. Um, but what I do, what like when it's my song for my band, I just kind of listen to the music a few times and see what vibe I'm getting, and then I try and think of a story that will showcase that. Um, So I'm like, okay, is this making me feel angry? Is it making me feel sad? Is it making me feel hopeful? And I find lyrics and imagery and description and stuff like that can show that emotion.
And I feel like the lyrics are both can be interpreted both very literally and metaphorically. Like my favorite song off of Orphans was "Mr. Cold" because that really had like a nightmare-inducing sort of aspect behind it. Like, do you take lyrical inspiration from like a more personal spot, or is music really just an escape where you like use other subject matter outside of who you personally are?
I do both. I do both. Because I feel like, well, my life on its own is not that interesting. I mean, I've had some crazy stories in the past, but it's like I'm only 33 years old. Um, how many songs can I write about my life? Like you need to start thinking about other stories, tell other people's stories. So I like to I do get inspired by things that have happened, like real life stories or like fiction or whatever I think is an interesting story, and I try and add my own touch to it. So like you mentioned Mr. Cold, that is actually based off a ghost sighting, a very famous ghost sighting, the Mothman. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Heard of it, yeah.
I think it's over on the East Coast somewhere where that ghost was particularly seen for years. But anyways, I took that as an inspiration, and then I moved on, and like I'm kind of talking about how um like the last chorus, for example, where I say how strange it feels now that the weird is all gone. Like that's from my perspective, that like when things are completely normal, for example, it feels a bit strange because you're so used to things being weird.
And
So
and may I
yeah.
just say that that statement, which I remember listening to, looking at those lyrics, being that was like that is the ultimate ending line. But oh my God,
Yeah.
does the context of those lyrics matter so much now? Because again, like
Right.
things like here in New York, things are technically, and I'm knocking on wood that it stays that way, are technically normal, but it feels so weird coming back because, think about when this pandemic is considered over. How weird is it going to be when
Yeah,
all that strange is gone?
for sure. I think people are not going to know how to like interact in person. It's going to take some time to adjust to that again.
Yeah,
But
depends on the show.
but yeah.
I was at that infamous Madball show in the park that made metal news everywhere, and that was that was as if nothing happened. So,
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine.
and
But yeah, go ahead.
like, is there almost like a lot of research that's involved in looking at your lyrics? Are you looking at forms of literature or film or visual art that maybe could help hone it in a way?
I wouldn't say that I do too much research, because then I feel like if I do too much research, my instinct is going to be to kind of write about what I already read, cuz you can't, like, if you're listening to, let's say, one album on repeat for a month and you go to write your own music, it's going to sound like what you just were listening to. Like, you can't control that. Once something's in your brain, it's hard to take it out. So, what I do is, if I watch a movie or I read a book or something that I enjoyed, I'll take a little part of it that I liked, but I won't really dive deep. Like, so like when I was writing Mr. Cold, I knew about the Mothman goth ghost sighting, but I didn't go on Google and see all the testimonials and people and stories and stuff like that, because I'm like, I just want to use this as inspiration, but add my own thoughts and continue the story in my own way.
Well, it's really great that you do that too, because like I would have never have interpreted Orphans to be like a concept album or something like that. I mean, there's a difference I've always said between being conceptual and being a concept album, but
Yeah.
because I think if you make it a concept album, you have to like start off from one song. You can only listen to that album in one way. But with Orphans, I've gone back to it numerous times. Sometimes I'll start off with Invertigo. Sometimes I'll start off with The Killing Eye. Sometimes I'll start off with
Yeah.
multiple tracks and
Yeah.
at once. And I think with every order you listen into the song, it almost adds its own little story or makes the album its own experience every time.
That's cool. That's super cool.
When it
Yeah, I
oh, you were saying?
no, no, you have a question? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, just because Have you always taken that approach from Eye of Providence to Five to now, or like has every album being, we're all different people in different eras of our lives? Has every album been sort of like a representative of who you and Danny and Simon and everybody is at that time, or again, is it more like an escapism?
I think for sure there's progress, like changes that happened over time. Danny is the primary songwriter when it comes to the music, and I write most of like my lyrics, wrote most of the lyrics and all my vocals myself. I guess the main difference from Eye of Providence to Orphans and that progression is that when I first joined, there was a little bit more of experimentation going on, and like the band didn't know exactly which direction they wanted to go towards. But I think with Orphans, it became very, very clear. And I had a much bigger role on that and the new EP, Days Before the World Webs, in deciding like which songs they're going to make the album, what the themes are going to be and stuff like that, whereas like I Have Providence, for example, was more of a collaboration.
Yeah. Do you like prefer to write ideas, like for instance when you were writing the piano parts or the lyrics? Do you prefer to write alone in isolation? It's a great feel for creativity, or do you maybe prefer to like have input from Danny or somebody else in the band to kind of help it come to fruition
Yeah.
more?
Yeah, I don't really like input, not because it's like my opinion is the greatest or anything like that. I just find that if I'm working on something and someone comes in with like a completely different idea, it's going to throw me off. So I'd rather do my own thing and then we'll see. And when it comes to lyrics, I tell the guys, if you have any lyrics that you want to share with me, send them to me and I'll find a way to use them. I don't really like it if you send me the lyrics and you tell me put these lyrics on this song and like these this is for verse 1 and this is for the chorus, cuz like that puts me in a box. Um so I'd rather like just take everything and decide what I'm going to do with it. And 9 out of 10 times honestly what I do just stays exactly as it is. And if the band has any suggestions for change, it will be like a rhythmic thing, like on a scream. They're like, hey, can you try, I don't know, holding that scream a little longer or coming in like a beat earlier, like really minimal stuff.
Okay.
Usually people are really happy with what I've done and they don't really want to change anything.
I wouldn't change a single thing from Eye of Providence to now, so I can't agree with them
Awesome.
more.
Thank you. Thank you.
But have you ever had like the best lyrics that you've ever written, but then they're always like one syllable over like the arrangements and they just don't fit?
Yeah, that happens, but I change my lyrics because I think it's extremely awkward if you try and fit lyrics into something that they don't quite fit. It throws you off. It's not as rhythmical. Like, especially let's say that there's like a really groovy riff and you want your screams to be like a rap flow almost. The second you, if you don't make the changes to do that, it's not going to groove. So you have to sacrifice a little bit of the lyrics, find like a synonym with less syllables or more syllables. I'll always take the musicality and the groove, the rhythm, the phrasing over the perfect words.
Do you think having multiple usages of your voice, because I've always said that the Agonist is a band for both dreams and nightmares, or for both heaven and hell. Like I think there really is like I think we've seen it through thousands of metalcore bands, but I really think with the Agonists, like there really is an essence of that duality, or that that bridge between singing and that screaming and melodic singing. And you're definitely not metalcore at all, so
No.
but like do you almost feel that like having a different usage of your voice with singing and screaming is almost expressing a different side of who you personally are emotionally as well?
Yeah, definitely. It's really interesting because people like to just say, they're singing and screaming like you just did. And I don't mean this in a bad way at all. But what I mean to say is there are a lot of subcategories in that. Like it's not just one thing when you talk about screaming, and it's not just one thing when you talk about singing. And there are vocalists that are maybe a little bit more monotone when it comes to their vocal techniques, and that's fine. Like if you can be amazing at one thing and you just like milk it out, that's fine. But for myself, when it comes to vocals, I almost see it as like voice acting that if I want a specific emotion, I need to pull out a specific vocal technique to give people that emotion. And I think there is a lot of diversity, both in the singing and the screaming, depending on what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely.
And yeah, some people catch it and some people don't, and but I still do it.
Well, for us, to a lot of people on the outside looking in, they would say, "Oh, it's screaming. It must be very anger driven." But like when I hear certain screams, like guttural is more in your face. Like like I get a different vibe when I listen to Deicide versus when I listen to like Mayhem or Emperor, and I get a different vibe when I listen to like Shadows Fall. So like I think that
Yeah,
there's and with your screaming, I do see elements of sheer aggression, but I see elements of despair, I see elements of
yeah,
defeat, and I see elements of victory as well. So I think
yeah.
really you have like a smorgasbord of screams.
Thank you. I mean, I always try to learn and get better at what I do and discover new things about my voice because, the second you stop trying and you think that you've made it is the second you stop progressing and growing. So, I'm really like, yeah, I'm really interested in like a lot of things that okay, what can a human voice do, And I know I can't do every single thing on the planet, but I can try.
You most certainly can. And the Agonist was all. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the Agonist was your first time joining a band, right? Because you were mainly a YouTube singer. You're currently though? Correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't know if I'm even supposed to mention this, but you also did start a project called Sicksense, right?
Yeah, yeah, I did.
Yep.
And yeah, why not mention it?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, because
But
I was gonna ask if like maybe
yeah.
when you joined a band versus doing your solo YouTube stuff, if like it almost felt like you had to almost relearn your instrument in a way because a band is a 4 or 5 person collaborative effort versus singing along to something.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I had to relearn. I just had to learn new stuff. And the Agonist was a band that vocally wasn't at all what I was doing. Like on paper, they never should have hired me. Um, I was only screaming for 6 months before I joined the band. So like my singing was up here and my screaming was like down here. But I think it was the singing that did it for them. They just really liked what I could do with my voice. So they really believed that give me more time and I will be just as good when it comes to like the harsh vocals. Um but yeah, so I just had to like basically stop taking my time because like when you're singing from your basement and you're putting stuff on YouTube or just the internet, there's no pressure. You can learn at your own pace, you can experiment. But then it's like I joined the Agonist and it was like, oh, we have shows in 6 months. You gotta learn how to do this stuff and you gotta learn how to do it live too.
Wow, no pressure, no pressure at all.
No, not at all. But I could have said no, but I didn't.
Well, I'm very thankful that you agreed to go along with it because I think those last 3 albums that we've gotten, we very much needed. Um, but
Thank you, thank
with
you.
with this new project, Sixth Sense, are you going into it with like a different maybe mind frame as opposed with the Agonist, or like are you expressing something completely different from yourself, or how did really? I mean, this will probably be the longest answer I got, but how did this sort of
Yeah.
see the light of day, Sixth Sense?
Yeah. So it honestly, it was random. Um my the other vocalist in the band is my husband and he auditioned for this band that was looking for a new singer, but he doesn't sing. So, like long story short, so I don't dwell too much on it, they really loved what he did in terms of like lyrics and rap flows and screams and stuff like that, but they were like, how do you feel about having a singer, like making it a two vocalist thing? So then I helped him with the third song, which coincidentally is Make Believe, the first single we put out. And they loved it so much. They're like, should we just ask Vicky to join? And initially I was a little bit like, this is strange. This is so different than anything I've done and that the world knows me for. But I think that's what it was that convinced me to do it. Like I wouldn't want to join another band that sounds like the Agonist
Yeah.
or in that extreme realm, like it was so different from what I'm already doing that I was like, heck, why not? And it is a style of music that I really like the whole new metal element like that. I grew up with that stuff. Like Linkin Park was one of the first bands that I was like, holy shit, this is amazing.
I have
Oh,
the
there
hybrid.
you go.
I have the
Yeah.
hybrid theory tattoo.
Well, there you go. Yeah. And I think a lot of metalheads, they just don't want to admit it. It's
Oh,
like,
no, all these metal elitists, like, oh, it's the
yeah.
funniest thing. So I'm like, so you mean to tell me right now that when you were 5 years old, you were skipping to school with your lunchbox, listening to "Into the Nighttime Eclipse" by like Emperor or something like that? Like, you're
Right?
every. I've always said if it wasn't for hybrid theory, I would not be into Tomb of the Mutilated. If it wasn't for Disturbs the Sickness, I would not be into Once Upon a Cross. Like, those are
For
so
sure. For
like
sure.
my two favorite genres are new metal and metalcore, and people like to crap on them all the time, but
Yeah.
and
It's so stupid because it's like you should be embracing the bands that are bringing more people into this genre that is already a very like at the bottom,
yeah,
of preference. So it's like I don't understand why people do that.
yeah. And
Um
Mudvayne announced their reunion, and they just sold
right.
out a festival because of it.
Of
You know,
course.
you have there's been a lot of like new metal trademarks. Look at how much Limp Bizkit is. I never would have thought in a million years that Steve from Blues Clues and Fred Durst would be the heroes of these times, but it's the
Yeah.
2020s for all we know. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And people love it. They just don't want to admit, like even Limp Bizkit. People love to hate them, but I went and saw Limp Bizkit actually. Really funny story. They played their first show um of after the pandemic and all that in not in Chicago, but like Indiana, and it's really close to where I live, and it was a free show, it was a festival. And I didn't even know it was their first show. I think they just took it as like a paid rehearsal,
yeah,
you know?
I need the money.
And people were loving it. There were people that were like in their mid 30s and 40s, I guess, so it really hit like, oh, these were my teenage years, you know? And people were like drinking beers and having fun and singing along to everything, and it's like people love it. At the end of the day, we can hate as much and talk shit as much as we want, but truth is a lot of people love it.
I I live in New York City. I'm surrounded by the New York City hardcore scene, so you can only imagine the
Right.
the
Yeah.
testosterone that I'm plagued with, so much like in that craziness. But I remember I showed one like real hardcore guy the Black Parade by My Chemical Romance, and he with this like masculine voice was like, this is pretty good," like so. So
Yeah.
nobody is safe. All I'm waiting for is that Spine Shank reunion, and then we're fully back into the realm of new metal.
And I'm perfectly okay with that.
Yeah. Are you a Disturbed
Yeah.
fan at all? Because I'm diehard.
It's it's a hit or miss. There's some songs that I really like, and there's some songs that I'm like indifferent about, but I don't really hate anything. The only like bands and music that I do hate are the bands that think that they're good and they're not.
Yeah.
But those bands never become, at the top. They're never professional bands because when you're not good, like when you're playing and your guitars are out of tune and your voice is out of tune, you're never going to make it anyways.
Yeah. Their
So,
their paychecks are
yeah.
drink tickets. So
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't really hate anything. It's just like I understand it and maybe it's just like not my cup of tea, but yeah.
as for Sicksense though, because wow, did we drift off, and I love it when
Yeah.
it does. But can we be expecting a full length album of that as well, or maybe are you gonna try to take that out on the road, or is this maybe just kind of like maybe something you and your husband are doing to explore music together and just
Yeah.
kind of like experiment?
So we're really serious about it. Like I'm at the point of my life where I'm not doing anything musically that I'm not serious about. Like I don't have the time or energy for it. So we are serious about it. And fun fact, we do have a lot of songs written and recorded already. However, we are taking the slow route because in this day and age with people's attention span, if we were to drop a full length tomorrow, who would listen to it? So we're kind of split. Well,
I would.
sure. I mean, you would, like a select few people would, but we're taking it slow. We're going to drop like another single in a few months and then possibly put out an EP and then like a second EP and then maybe a full length after that.
Okay.
But we're not in a rush to just throw all the songs out there and, they get overlooked.
Okay. Well, you bringing in a new metal style, I gotta be honest with you. Like, I'm really, really curious right now. So at least have a single sometime soon, because I'm gonna be thinking about this all for a while now. Like,
Yeah, so like we dropped the first single in August, and I think the next one we're thinking end of the year, possibly beginning of 2022, somewhere around there.
Awesome. But
Yeah.
before we go, I want to thank you so much for your
Hmm.
time and for such a great conversation. Again, is
Yeah.
there just anything else that you would like to promote for the Agonist with the release of this EP? Is there maybe another full length album in the works? I'd imagine with all this time we've had, some people had an artistic
Yeah.
dud. Some people were more artistically inspired than ever. But we will be
Yeah.
seeing you. Do you plan on maybe making up those tour dates? We want you back here in New York City.
I would love to, and we haven't toured the US since 2017. So we're trying. We are in talks for 2022, possibly a US tour, but it's not in our hands. It's really just will they let us, Will venues be open? Will
Yeah.
the pandemic situation and all that, but we're trying to play shows, and if we can't play shows, we're just going to be putting out more content on the internet and staying busy and productive.
Are you taking song requests for YouTube covers by any chance?
uh, I get so many. That's why I do my Twitch streams, because that's an easier way to just kind of like sing something without it being like a full production cover. um I mean, you're welcome to suggest something, but I don't know.
First Noble Truth by Shadows Fall. I just have a feeling that that will be a really, really well done cover.
Cool. I mean, I'll take a look at it. I do remember really enjoying that album from Shadows Fall, but that was like a long time ago that I listened to it, so I'll take another listen and see.
Knocking on wood, I just got my ticket to that reunion. But thank you so much,
Cool.
Vicky. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Everybody,
my
Vicky
pleasure.
of the Agonist, be sure to check out their brand new EP, Days Before the World Wept. This is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.